There's a pattern hiding in plain sight. It's on your coffee mug, on that dress in your closet, on the bow of a cartoon mouse you've known since childhood. You've seen it 10,000 times, and yet you've never really seen it. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. For most of human history, this pattern didn't exist. Not physically, the dots were always there, but culturally, they were invisible. Worse than invisible, they were feared. In medieval Europe, if you wore evenly spaced circles on your clothing, people didn't think you were fashionable. They thought you were sick. Dots meant plague. They meant smallpox, leprosy, syphilis, the visual language of disease and uncleanliness. The pattern was so taboo that it didn't even have a proper name. So how did we get from that to this? How did the most playful pattern in the world get its name from a scandalous peasant dance that swept Europe in the 1840s? And why is there actually no connection at all between the dance and the dots? That's the mystery, and the answer reveals something unsettling about how culture works, about how we name things, about how a single word can make the invisible suddenly impossible to ignore. This is the story of how a dance from a Bohemian village didn't just conquer ballrooms. It conquered your wardrobe, and it did it by accident. Before we talk about the dance, we need to talk about the silence. Go back to the Middle Ages. European textile makers were capable of extraordinary things, intricate tapestries, brocaded silks, embroidered velvets. But there is almost no record of anyone wearing evenly spaced, identical circles. Not because they couldn't make them, but because nobody wanted to. The visual association was too strong. In a world before germ theory, disease announced itself on the skin. Spots, pustules, rashes. To wear a pattern of spots was to wear the mark of illness. It was like showing up to dinner in a costume of death. There were exceptions, of course. In St. Gallen, Switzerland, textile makers produced something called dotted Swiss, sheer cotton with tiny raised dots. In France, there was quincunx, a cluster of 5 dots arranged like the 5 on a die. In Germany, Thalertupfen coin-sized dots named after the currency. But these were niche, regional, nameless in the way that background noise is nameless. The technology was also a barrier. Before the Industrial Revolution, creating perfectly round, evenly spaced dots at scale was nearly impossible. The sewing machine wasn't reliably functional until the mid-1800s. Hand-stitching a grid of identical circles, that was madness. So the pattern waited. For centuries, it sat in the margins of culture, a visual idea that nobody wanted to claim. And then, in a small village in Bohemia, a young woman started dancing. And everything changed. But not in the way you think. Because what happened next wasn't about fabric. It was about rebellion. The year was roughly 1830. The place, a village near what is now the Czech Republic. A servant girl named Anna Slezikova was dancing to a local folk tune, something fast, something rhythmic, something her body invented before her mind could catch up. A music teacher named Joseph Neruda saw her. He wrote the steps down. He taught them to others. And somewhere in that transmission, a dance was born. Or so the story goes. Historians are skeptical, and they should be. The tale has the fingerprints of 19th century romanticism all over it. Intellectuals of that era loved the idea of noble peasants creating pure art. The truth is probably messier. The polka evolved from the waltz, which itself had been a scandal just decades earlier. But the origin myth doesn't matter as much as what happened next. By 1835, the polka had reached Prague. By 1839, Vienna. In 1840, a Czech dance instructor named Rob introduced it to Paris. And Paris, already hungry for anything that would shake the dust off aristocratic ballrooms, lost its mind. The polka was fast. It was close. Partners held each other in a way that made the old guard clutch their pearls. One English magazine in 1853 complained that the waltz was indecent because a man's arm spanned a woman's waist. The polka made the waltz look like a handshake. Couples hopped. They whirled. They moved with a speed and physicality that broke every rule of formal dance. And that was precisely the point. The 1840s were a revolutionary decade in Europe. Political uprisings were simmering. The old social order was cracking. And here was a dance that didn't require a noble pedigree. It didn't need years of training. A factory worker and a banker could learn the same steps in an afternoon. The polka was democratic in a way that terrified the elite. By 1844, A New York newspaper was already reporting on the new follies of Europe. Within 2 years, street children in Manhattan were chanting, "Won't you dance the polka?" It crossed the Atlantic like a virus. Composers wrote polka compositions. Strauss, both father and son, incorporated it into their repertoires. Dance halls filled with people who had never touched silk in their lives, now spinning in each other's arms to a Bohemian beat. This was polka mania, and it was about to do something strange to the world of fashion, but not in the way you'd expect. Here's the part that surprised me. When I started researching this, I assumed there was some logical connection between the dance and the dots. Maybe the dancers' movements traced circular patterns. Maybe the Bohemian folk costumes had spotted embroidery. Maybe the rhythm of the music somehow translated into a visual beat. There is none of that. The polka dot has absolutely nothing to do with the polka dance. Nothing. Zero. The dots existed before the dance. The dance didn't influence the pattern. The pattern didn't mimic the dance. What happened instead was something far more modern and far more cynical. What happened was the original trend jacking. In the 1840s and 1850s, if you wanted to sell something, anything, you put the word polka in front of it. Polka hats, polka jackets, polka suspenders, polka curtains, polka gauze. There was even polka pudding. Merchants across Europe and America realized that the dance wasn't just popular, it was a signal. It meant youth, energy, modernity, rebellion with a smile. So they did what marketers still do today. They attached a trending word to an unrelated product and watched it sell. The pattern of evenly spaced dots was already technically possible by then. The Industrial Revolution had given us mechanized weaving. The sewing machine had made precision achievable. The dots were ready. They just needed a name that didn't remind people of smallpox. Polka dot was first printed in 1857 in Godey's Lady's Book, the most popular American women's magazine of the era. The description was simple: a muslin scarf embroidered in rows of round polka dots. Think about what that sentence is actually doing. It's not describing a relationship between dance and fabric. It's doing something far more powerful. It's giving permission. Before that moment, wearing dots was eccentric at best, dangerous at worst. After that moment, it was fashionable. The word polka didn't describe the dots. It legitimized them. It took a pattern that had been culturally invisible for centuries and made it visible by attaching it to the most exciting cultural phenomenon of the decade. This is the part that genuinely changed how I think about trends. We believe that names describe things, but sometimes names create things. The polka dot didn't become popular because it looked like the dance. It became popular because the dance made it sayable, wearable, thinkable. And here's the wildest part: almost every other polka product vanished. Polka hats, gone. Polka pudding, forgotten. Polka suspenders, a historical footnote at best. Only the dots survive. Only the pattern outlived the craze that named it. Why? Because a pattern is harder to kill than a product. A pattern can be reinterpreted. It can shrink, grow, change color, move from children's clothing to haute couture to fine art. A pattern is a language. And once you give a language a name, it never goes silent again. By the 1920s, the polka dot had completed a journey that would have been unimaginable to a medieval peasant. In 1926, Norma Smallwood, the first indigenous woman to win Miss America, wore a polka dot swimsuit. 2 years later, Minnie Mouse debuted her red dress with white dots. The pattern had become synonymous with American optimism: playful, clean, youthful, innocent. But innocence is never simple. In the 1940s, Frank Sinatra sang Polka Dots and Moonbeams, his first hit. In the 1950s, Marilyn Monroe wore them. Lucille Ball. By the 1960s, Twiggy and Goldie Hawn made them mod. Prince wore them. Princess Diana wore them. Julia Roberts wore them in Pretty Woman. Yet the pattern never lost its edge. In 1960s Japan, Yae Kusama took the polka dot and turned it into something almost overwhelming: infinite fields of dots that disoriented the viewer, that suggested both cosmic order and psychological chaos. Where fashion saw playfulness, Kusama saw infinity. She once said that a single polka dot contains the entire universe. And she might be right, because there's a paradox at the heart of this pattern that I've been turning over in my mind ever since I started researching it. A single dot is the simplest thing in the world. In geometry, it's called a point, the origin of all shapes. A line is just a dot that moved. A circle is just a dot that grew. Every drawing, every letter, every digital image on your screen begins with a dot. But put 1,000 dots together. They don't simplify, they multiply. They create vibration, movement, optical illusion. They make your eyes dance. A dot is stillness, dots are motion. And that, I think, is why the name stuck. Not because of the dance, but because the dance and the pattern share the same secret. They both take something simple, a step, a point, and repeat it until it becomes something you can't look away from. The polka didn't put dots on your dress. It gave the dots a name. And in doing so, it taught us something about how culture works. We don't discover patterns, we claim them, we name them. And once named, they outlive us. I keep thinking about Anna Slezakova, whether she was real or romanticized, whether she invented a dance or simply danced it first. She started something that rippled outward in ways she could never have imagined. A peasant dance in Bohemia became a Parisian scandal, became an American marketing gimmick, became a pattern on a cartoon mouse, became an art installation in Tokyo. And somewhere in the middle of all that, a pattern that had been feared for centuries, associated with disease, with death, with the unclean, became a symbol of joy. That's not just fashion history, that's alchemy. The next time you see a polka dot, I want you to remember, it wasn't always called that. It wasn't always welcome. For most of human history, it was invisible. And then, in a single decade, a dance from a village gave it a name, and a name gave it a life. Everything you see around you that feels permanent, every pattern, every word, every style was once unnamed, once feared, once invisible, and someone somewhere gave it permission to exist. Here's what I want you to do. Look around the room you're in right now. Find something, a pattern, a texture, a color combination that you've seen 1,000 times but never actually noticed. Something so familiar it's become invisible. Now give it a name, not its real name. A new one, something that describes not what it is but what it feels like to you. Write it down, in the comments or on a piece of paper or just in your head. Because the polka dot proves that naming is the first act of seeing, and there's a whole world of unnamed things around you, waiting for someone to claim them. Thank you for being with us. Subscribe for more.